Section 4 of Beacon Lights of History, Volume 2, Jewish Heroes and Prophets, by John Lord. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by K. Hand. Joseph, Part 2. Over this fertile, favored, and civilized nation Joseph reigned, with delegated power indeed, but with power that was absolute, when his starving brothers came to Egypt to buy corn, for the famine extended probably over Western Asia. He is to be viewed, not as a prophet or preacher or reformer or even a warrior like Moses, but as a merely executive ruler. As the son-in-law of the high priest of Hierapolis, and delegated governor of the land, in the highest favor with the king, and himself a priest, it is probable that Joseph was initiated into the esoteric wisdom of the priesthood. He was undoubtedly stern, resolute, and inflexible in his relations with men, as great executive chieftains necessarily must be, whatever their private sympathies and friendships. To all appearance he was a born Egyptian, as he spoke the language of Egypt, had adopted its habits, and was clothed with the insignia of Egyptian power. So that when the sons of Jacob, who during the years of famine in Canaan had come down to Egypt to buy corn, were ushered into his presence, and bowed down to him as had been predicted, he was harsh to them, although at once recognizing them. "Whence come ye?" he said roughly to them. They replied, "From the land of Canaan to buy corn." "Nay," continued he, "ye are spies." "Not so, my lord, but to buy food are thy servants come. We are all one man's sons. We are true men. Thy servants are not spies." "Nay," he said, "to see the nakedness of the land are ye come." For famine also prevailed in Egypt, and its governor naturally would not wish its weakness to be known, for fear of a hostile invasion. They replied, "Thy servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. The youngest is this day with our father, and one is not." But Joseph still persisted that they were spies, and put them in prison for 3 days, after which he demanded as condition of their release that the younger brothers should also appear before him. "If ye be true men," said he, "let one of your brothers be bound in the house of your prison, while you carry corn for the famine of your house. But bring your youngest brother unto me, and ye shall not die." There was apparently no alternative but to perish, or to bring Benjamin into Egypt. The sons of Jacob were compelled to accept the condition. Then their consciences were moved, and they saw a punishment for their crime in selling Joseph 15 years before. Even Reuben accused them, and in the very presence of Joseph reminded them of their unnatural cruelty, not supposing that he understood them, since Joseph had spoken through an interpreter. This was too much for the stern governor. He turned aside and wept, but speedily returned and took from them Simeon, and bound him before their eyes, and retained him for a surety. Then he caused their sacks to be filled with corn, putting also their money therein, and gave them in addition food for their return journey. But as one of them on that journey opened his sack to give his ass provender, he espied the money, and they were all filled with fear at this unlooked-for incident. They made haste to reach their home and report the strange intelligence to their father, including the demand for the appearance of Benjamin, which filled him with the most violent grief. "Joseph is not," cried he, "and Simeon is not, and ye will take Benjamin away." Reuben here expostulated with frantic eloquence. Jacob, however, persisted. "My son shall not go down with you. If mischief befall him, ye will bring down my gray hairs in sorrow to the grave." Meanwhile the famine pressed, as Joseph knew full well it would, and Jacob's family had eaten all their corn, and it became necessary to get a new supply from Egypt. But Judah refused to go without Benjamin. "The man," said he, "did solemnly protest unto us, saying, Ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you." Then Jacob upbraided Judah for revealing the number and condition of his family. But Judah excused himself on account of the searching cross-examination of the austere governor, which no one could resist, and persisted in the absolute necessity of Benjamin's appearance in Egypt, unless they all should yield to starvation. Moreover, he promised to be surety for his brother, that no harm should come to him. Jacob at last saw the necessity of allowing Benjamin to go, and reluctantly gave his consent. But in order to appease the terrible man of Egypt, he ordered his sons to take with them a present of spices and balm and almonds, luxuries then in great demand, and a double amount of money in their sacks to repay what they had received. Then in pious resignation he said, "If I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved," and hurried away his sons. In due time they all safely arrived in Egypt, and with Benjamin stood before Joseph, and made obeisance, and then excused themselves to Joseph's steward because of the money which had been returned in their sacks. The steward encouraged them, and brought Simeon to them, and led them into Joseph's house, where a feast was prepared by his orders. With great difficulty Joseph restrained his feelings at the sight of Benjamin, who was his own full brother, but asked kindly about the father. At last his pent-up affections gave way, and he sought his chamber and wept there in secret. He then sat down to the banquet with his attendants at a separate table, for the Egyptians would not eat with foreigners, still unrevealed to his brethren, but showed his partiality to Benjamin by sending him a mess 5 times greater than to the rest. They marveled greatly that they were seated at the table according to their seniority, and questioned among themselves how the austere governor could know the ages of strangers. Not yet did Joseph declare himself. His brothers were not yet sufficiently humbled. A severe trial was still in store for them. As before, he ordered his steward to fill the sacks as full as they could carry, with every man's money in them, for he would not take his father's money, and further ordered that his silver drinking cup should be put in Benjamin's sack. The brothers had scarcely left the city when they were overtaken by the steward on a charge of theft, and upbraided for stealing the silver cup. Of course they felt their innocence and protested it, but it was of no avail, although they declared that if the cup should be found in any one of their sacks, he in whose sack it might be should die for the offense. The steward took them at their word, proceeded to search the sacks, and lo, what was their surprise and grief to see that the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. They rent their clothes in utter despair and returned to the city. Joseph received them austerely, and declared that Benjamin should be retained in Egypt as his servant or slave. Then Judah, forgetting in whose presence he was, cast aside all fear, and made the most eloquent and plaintive speech recorded in the Bible, offering to remain in Benjamin's place as a slave, for how could he face his father, who would surely die of grief at the loss of his favorite child? Joseph could refrain his feelings no longer. He made every attendant leave his presence, and then declared himself to his brothers, whom God had sent to Egypt to be the means of saving their lives. The brothers, conscience-stricken and amazed, completely humbled and afraid, could not answer his questions. Then Joseph tenderly, in their own language, begged them to come near, and explained to them that it was not they who sent him to Egypt, but God, to work out a great deliverance to their posterity, and to be a father to Pharaoh himself, inasmuch as the famine was to continue 5 years longer. Haste ye, and go up to my father, and say unto him that God hath made me lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, and thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen near unto me, thou and thy children, and thy children's children, and thy flocks and thy herds, and all that thou hast, and there will I nourish thee. And ye shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt, and of all that ye have seen, and ye shall haste and bring down my father hither. And he fell on Benjamin's neck and wept, and kissed all his brothers. Then they talked with him without further reserve. The news that Joseph's brethren had come to Egypt pleased Pharaoh, so grateful was the king for the preservation of his kingdom. He could not do enough for such a benefactor. Say to thy brethren, lade your beasts and go, and take your father and your households, and come unto me, and I will give you the good of the land of Egypt, and ye shall eat the fat of the land. And the king commanded them to take his wagons to transport their families and goods. Joseph also gave to each one of them changes of raiment, and to Benjamin 300 pieces of silver, and 5 changes of raiment, and 10 asses laden with the good things of Egypt for their father, and 10 she-asses laden with corn. As they departed, he archly said unto them, See that ye fall not out by the way. When they arrived at Canaan and told their father all that happened and all they had seen, he fainted. The news was too good to be true. He would not believe them. But when he saw the wagons, his spirit revived, and he said, It is enough. Joseph, my son, is yet alive. I will go and see him before I die. The old man is again young in spirit. He is for going immediately. He could leap, yea, fly. To Egypt, then, Israel, with his sons and his cattle and all his wealth, hastened. His sons are astonished at the providence of God, so clearly and impressively demonstrated on their behalf. The reconciliation of the family is complete. All envy is buried in the unbounded prosperity of Joseph. He is now too great for envy. He is to be venerated as the instrument of God in saving his father's house and the land of Egypt. They all now bowed down to him, father and sons alike, and the only strife now is who shall render him the most honor. He is the pride and glory of his family, as he is of the land of Egypt and of the household of Pharaoh. In the hospitality of the king, and his absence of jealousy of the nomadic people whom he settled in the most fertile of his provinces, we see additional confirmation of the fact that he was one of the shepherd kings. The Pharaoh of Joseph's time seemed to have affiliated with the Israelites as natural friends, to assist him in case of war. All the souls that came into Egypt with Jacob were 70 in number, although some historians think there was a much larger number. Rawlinson estimates it at 2,000, and Dean Payne Smith at 3,000. Jacob was 130 years of age when he came to dwell in the land of Goshen, and he lived 17 years in Egypt. When he died, Joseph was about 50 years old and was still in power. It was the dying wish of the old patriarch to be buried with his fathers, and he made Joseph promise to carry his bones to the land of Canaan and bury them in the sepulchre which Abraham had bought, even the cave of Machpelah. Before Jacob died, Joseph brought his 2 sons to him to receive his blessing, Manasseh and Ephraim, born in Egypt, whose grandfather was the high priest of On, the city of the sun. As Manasseh was the oldest, he placed him at the right hand of Jacob, but the old man wittingly and designedly laid his right hand on Ephraim, which displeased Joseph. But Jacob, without giving his reason, persisted. While he prophesied that Manasseh should be great, Ephraim, he said, should be greater, verified in the fact that the tribe of Ephraim was the largest of all the tribes and the most powerful until the captivity. It was nearly as large as all the rest together, although in the time of Moses the tribe of Manasseh had become more numerous. We cannot penetrate the reason why Ephraim the youngest son was preferred to the older, any more than why Jacob was preferred to Esau. After Jacob had blessed the sons of Joseph, he called his other sons around his dying bed to predict the future of their descendants. Reuben the oldest was told that he would not excel, because he had loved his father's concubine and committed a grievous sin. Simeon and Levi were the most active in seeking to compass the death of Joseph, and a curse was sent upon them. Judah was exalted above them all, for he had sought to save Joseph, and was eloquent in pleading for Benjamin, the most magnanimous of the sons. So from him it was predicted that the scepter should not depart from his house until Shiloh should come, the Messiah to whose appearance all the patriarchs looked. And all that Jacob predicted about his sons to their remote descendants came to pass, but the highest blessing was accorded to Joseph, as was realized in the future ascendancy of Ephraim. When Jacob had made an end of his blessings and predictions, he gathered up his feet into his bed and gave up the ghost, and Joseph caused him to be embalmed, as was the custom in Egypt. When the days of public mourning were over, 70 days, Joseph obtained leave from Pharaoh to absent himself from the kingdom and his government, to bury his father according to his wish. And he departed in great pomp with chariots and horses, together with his brothers and a great number, and deposited the remains of Jacob in the cave of the field of Machpelah, where Abraham himself was buried, and then returned to his duties in Egypt. It is not mentioned in the Scriptures how long Joseph retained his power as prime minister of Pharaoh, but probably until a new dynasty succeeded the throne, the 18th, as it is supposed, for we are told that a new king arose who knew not Joseph. He lived to be 110 years of age, and when he died his body was embalmed and placed in a sarcophagus, and ultimately was carried to Canaan, and buried with his fathers, according to the oath or promise he exacted of his brothers. His last recorded words were a prediction that God would bring the children of Israel out of Egypt to the land which he sware unto Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. On his deathbed he becomes, like his father, a prophet. He had foretold his own future elevation when only a youth of 17, though only in the form of a dream, the full purport of which he did not comprehend. As an old man about to die, he predicts the greatest blessing which could happen to his kindred, their restoration to the land promised unto Abraham. Joseph is one of the most interesting characters of the Bible, one of the most fortunate, and one of the most faultless. He resisted the most powerful temptations, and there is no recorded act which sullies his memory. Although most of his life was spent among idolaters, and he married a pagan woman, he retained his allegiance to the God of his fathers. He ever felt that he was a stranger in a strange land, although its supreme governor, and looked to Canaan as the future and beloved home of his family and race. He regarded his residence in Egypt only as a means of preserving the lives of his kindred, and himself as an instrument to benefit both his family and the country which he ruled. His life was one of extraordinary usefulness. He had great executive talents, which he exercised for the good of others. Though stern and even hard in his official duties, he had unquenchable natural affections. His heart went out to his old father, his brother Benjamin, and to all his kindred with inexpressible tenderness. He was as free from guile as he was from false pride. In giving instructions to his brothers how they should appear before the king, and what they should say when questioned as to their occupations, he advised the utmost frankness, to say that they were shepherds, although the occupation of a shepherd was an abomination to an Egyptian. He had exceeding tact in confronting the prejudices of the king and the priesthood. He took no pains to conceal his birth and lineage in the most aristocratic country of the world. Considering that he was only second in power and dignity to an absolute monarch, his life was unostentatious and his habits simple. If we seek a parallel to him among modern statesmen, he most resembles Colbert as the minister of Louis XIV., or Prince Metternich, who in great simplicity ruled continental Europe for a quarter of a century. Nothing is said of his palaces or pleasures or wealth. He had not the austere and unbending pride of Mordecai, whose career as an instrument of Providence for the welfare of his countrymen was as remarkable as Joseph's. He was more like Daniel in his private life than any of those Jews who have arisen to great power in foreign lands, though he had not Daniel's exalted piety or prophetic gifts. He was faithful to the interests of his sovereign, and greatly increased the royal authority. He got possession of the whole property of the nation for the benefit of his master, but exacted only a fifth part of the produce of the land for the support of the government. He was a priest of a grossly polytheistic religion, but acknowledged only the one supreme God, whose instrument he felt himself to be. His services to the state were transcendent, but his supremest mission was to preserve the Hebrew nation. The condition of the Israelites in Egypt after the death of Joseph and during the period of their sojourn it is difficult to determine. There is a doubt among the critics as to the length of this sojourn, the Bible in several places asserting that it lasted 430 years, which if true would bring the Exodus to the end of the 19th dynasty. Some suppose that the residence in Egypt was only 215 years. The territory assigned to the Israelites was a small one, and hence must have been densely populated, if, as it is reckoned, 2 millions of people left the country under the leadership of Moses and Aaron. It is supposed that the reigning sovereign at the time was Meneptah, successor of Ramses II. It is then the great Ramses who was the king from whom Moses fled, the most distinguished of all the Egyptian monarchs as warrior and builder of monuments. He was the second king of the 18th dynasty, and reigned in conjunction with his father Seti for 60 years. Among his principal works was the completion of the city of Ramesses, or Tanis or Zone, one of the principal cities of Egypt, begun by his father and made a royal residence. He also, it appears from the monuments, built Pithon and other important towns by the forced labor of the Israelites. Rameses and Pithon were called treasure cities, the site of the latter having been lately discovered to the east of Tanis. They were located in the midst of a fertile country, now dreary and desolate, which was the object of great panegyric. An Egyptian poet, quoted by Dr. Charles S. Robinson, paints the vicinity of Zone, where Pharaoh resided at the time of the Exodus, as full of loveliness and fertility. Her fields are verdant with excellent herbage, her bowers bloom with garlands, her pools are prolific in fish, and in the ponds are ducks. Each garden is perfumed with the smell of honey, the granaries are full of wheat and barley. Vegetables and reeds and herbs are growing in the parks. Flowers and nosegays are in the houses. Lemons, citrons, and figs are in the orchards. Such was the field of Zone in ancient times, near Rameses, which the Israelites had built without straw to make their bricks, and from which place they set out for the general rendezvous at Succoth under Moses. It will be noted that if Ramses, or Tanis, was the residence of the court when Moses made his demand on Meneptah, it was in the midst of the settlements of the Israelites, in the land of Goshen, which the last of the shepherd kings had assigned to them. It is impossible to tell what advance in civilization was made by the Israelites in consequence of their sojourn in Egypt, but they must have learned many useful arts, and many principles of jurisprudence, and acquired a better knowledge of agriculture. They learned to be patient under oppression and wrong, to be frugal and industrious in their habits, and obedient to the voice of their leaders. but unfortunately they acquired a love of idolatrous worship which they did not lose until their captivity in Babylon. The golden calves of the wilderness were another form of the worship of the sacred bulls of Memphis. They were easily led to worship the sun under the Egyptian and Canaanitish names. Had the children of Israel remained in the Promised Land in the early part of their history, they would probably have perished by famine, or have been absorbed by their powerful Canaanitish neighbors. In Egypt they were well fed, rapidly increased in number, and became a nation to be feared even while in bondage. In the land of Canaan they would have been only a pastoral or nomadic people, unable to defend themselves in war, and unacquainted with the use of military weapons. They might have been exterminated, without constant miracles and perpetual supernatural aid, which is not the order of Providence. In Egypt, it is true, the Israelites lost their political independence, but even under slavery there is much to be learned from civilized masters. How rapid and marvelous the progress of the African races in the Southern States in their 200 years in bondage! When before in the history of the world has there been such a progress among mere barbarians, with fetichism for their native religion? Races have advanced in every element of civilization, and in those virtues which gave permanent strength to character, under all the benumbing and degrading influences of slavery, while nations with wealth, freedom, and prosperity have declined and perished. The slavery of the Israelites in Egypt may have been a blessing in disguise, from which they emerged when they were able to take care of themselves. Moses led them out of bondage, but Moses also incorporated in his institutions the wisdom of the Egyptians. He was indeed inspired to declare certain fundamental truths, but he also taught the lessons of experience which a great nation had acquired by 2,000 years of prosperity. Who can tell, who can measure the civilization which the Israelites must have carried out of Egypt, with the wealth of which they despoiled their masters? Where else at that period could they have found such teachers? The Persians at that time were shepherds like themselves in Canaan, the Assyrians were hunters, and the Greeks had no historical existence. Only the discipline of 40 years in the wilderness, under Moses, was necessary to make them a nation of conquerors, for they had already learned the arts of agriculture, and knew how to protect themselves in walled cities. A nomadic people were they no longer, as in the time of Jacob, but small farmers, who had learned to irrigate their barren hills and till their fertile valleys; and they became a powerful though peaceful nation, unconquered by invaders for 1,000 years, and unconquerable for all the time in their traditions, habits, and mental characteristics. From one man, the patriarch Jacob, did this great nation rise, and did not lose its national unity and independence until from the tribe of Judah a deliverer arose who redeemed the human race. Surely how favored was Joseph, in being the instrument under Providence of preserving this nation in its infancy, and placing its people in a rich and fertile country where they could grow and multiply, and learn principles of civilization which would make them a permanent power in the progress of humanity. End of section 4.